Meet one of winter's regulars. Let's paint together. Sometimes winter can feel empty, but this little bird migrates south from Canada to spend the coldest part of the year with people in the US. Today we are painting the Dark-Eyed Junco. Let's dive in together. Materials needed for this project: we need watercolor paper, our outline, pencil, micron pen, a number 12 round paintbrush, masking tape, paint and a paint tray, water, and spray bottle. A little bit more about our materials. I'm using the Lita Art Supply watercolor pad. It is 140-pound cold press paper. This is reasonably priced and it does a really good job for the project that we're doing. We're gonna do a little wet on wet and just do one wash, and when it dries it usually leaves this really cool texture, but you can use whatever type of watercolor paper you like. I'm also using a micron brush, and it is the number 8, and that way you've got a nice bold line that you can see. I'm also using the number 12 round brush. It is big enough that I can get into all this area here, and then also small enough towards the tip that I can make some details. For the majority of the bird, we're using a Payne's Gray. And then for the beak and the feet, we're gonna use a permanent orange mixed in with a little bit of white gouache. Totally forgot about a paper towel. You're gonna need a paper towel to dry off your brush. All right, now we're ready to dive in and start painting our Dark-Eyed Junco. I'm going to take my spray bottle and spray down my paints. Again, I've got the Payne's Gray, some gouache, and then some of that permanent orange. And while those paints are activating, I'm going to get some clean water and get the main part of the body here. I'm not going to worry too much about the edges. We can go in with a little wet paint on dry paper later on. And when you're getting your paper wet, when you start painting, you want your paper to be shiny, like satin. You don't want it to really pool and have a lot of water. And we're just gonna get the main part of this top part of the body. Oops, I got the eyeball. Now the paint is gonna go where the water is. So I got a little bit inside the eyeball. So I'm just gonna take a paper towel and dry that area off because I don't wanna do that just yet. So we're getting the top and the tail and that wing. And then mix up a nice little puddle of that Payne's Gray to be a tea-like consistency, and start going in with the paint. Now, I really wanted to paint these guys in the winter time. It is February. Spring is almost here. I can feel it. Not really. I can't almost feel it. It's been so snowy. It is like the coldest winter I can remember. And we are coming up quickly on the official start date of spring. And since I'm going to be moving to Florida here in the next couple months, this is going to be my last winter I'm hanging out with the Dark-Eyed Junco. Now these guys are a sparrow, and they live in North America, and in the winter time they come down from Canada to the northern parts of the US. So I've lived in Ohio most of my life, but I never really noticed the Dark-Eyed Junco until I lived in Loveland. And maybe that's because I was in my 40s. And I don't know, something happens when you turn 40. All of a sudden, you really start paying attention to birds. And I noticed these cute little guys jumping around, hopping around on the ground by the feeder. And they almost look like a penguin because they got the black and the white. And they're so round and fluffy. They almost look like a little angry bird. They're just so cute. And I never noticed them before until a couple years ago. But they are not rare or anything. They are, and their status is of least concern. So scientists aren't worried about them being on the endangered species list or anything like that. Oh my gosh, I am just destined to get that eyeball, I guess. And take a little paper towel and fix it. It's fine. And now I'm currently living with my parents, still in Ohio, and we still see these guys at the feeder, and they're just so cute. So I wanted to paint them as a way to remember my winters here in the Ohio region. But I tell you what, I am not going to miss winter at all. And these guys love to eat seeds. So you'll find them usually on the ground hopping around by your feeder. And they are really true snowbirds. That's their nickname, is a snowbird, and their scientific name means of the winter. So when I think about wintertime birds, cardinals for sure, that red against like a green, an evergreen tree, pine tree, really gives me feelings of Christmas time. But usually around Thanksgiving in November, I start noticing these guys in my area, and that's how I know that is the official start of wintertime. So that means they migrate in for the winter time. Now, I don't like that it's really pulling up right here, so I'm just gonna dry my brush off a little bit and help pick some of that up. These guys spend about 65% of their time on the ground. And then they get a nice winter coat. They get more feathers in the winter time to keep them warm. And then I'm still seeing them in my area, and as soon as I stop seeing them, I will know that spring is on the way. And then the bird that really lets me know that it is almost springtime is a robin. When I see robins hopping on the ground instead of the Dark-Eyed Junco, I know spring is just around the corner. Now, it is jaggedy here. You don't have to be too precise. We're just giving the idea of feathers. So don't be too precious about it. When you go in with that micron pen, you don't have to be exact, because that micron pen will help do the details, the color can just be there as color is kind of the star of the show, and then the micron helps to add the detail. It's the supporting character, or supporting cast, so to speak. So these guys are a darker color. Around the beak, you will notice it is a lot darker than the rest of the body. And I'm going in with some little strokes, and that'll help give the impression of feathers too. And you can let watercolor do its thing. And also let that micron do all the heavy lifting as far as the details. I'm going to go in and add a little bit darker in around the head. I got some ocean sounds playing in the background, so that's kind of contrasts the whole winter vibe of today. I don't know what you would play nature sounds for winter. I guess like ice cracking. I don't know. I am going to kind of add some little lines, again giving the impression of feathers. I'm just going to darken it up around the eye. The eyeball is a grayish color, so by darkening this now, we won't lose the eye later. Quit looking so grumpy, bird. Some animals just kind of look grumpy. That's okay, that's why we love them. All right, I'm gonna go in and get the tail. And get my brush wet, just lay down some water, and then go in with some color. I went outside my lines a little bit there, and that's okay. It kind of gives a suggestion of an individual tail feather. All right, I'm liking how that's looking. So I'm gonna let this dry, and while that dries, we're gonna work on the feet. Now, online it said they have a light pink beak and feet, but if you look at the reference photo, it looks like a light orange to me, especially on the foot that's further away. So I'm gonna mix up a light orange, and I'm going to do that by grabbing some orange over here, and then also grabbing some of this white gouache to help lighten it. And then I'm gonna go in with a wet brush on a dry page and get those feet. We're gonna lay down the orange first, and then we'll add a little bit of light gray over top of that. Kind of make it look a little bit more realistic. Now, if the feet and the beak look like a light pink to you and you've got a light pink handy, you are more than welcome to paint your bird whichever colors you like. If you remember the dress picture from, oh gosh, was that like 10 years ago, 2015 or something like that? Maybe it was earlier than that. And some people saw the dress as navy and black, and some people saw it as gold and white. I was in the navy and black crowd. There was one time where I was just like scrolling and I very quickly saw it as white and gold, and then very quickly my brain switched it back to the navy and black. But it was very evenly split down the middle. So I just recently saw something where it was explaining the science behind that, and it all depends on how your brain is perceiving the way that the light is hitting the dress and if it's in the shadow or not. So is it the brain perceiving it differently, or is it the eye, or maybe we actually all see things differently. I remember it was around that time we had a fundraiser at work and I painted an animal that we have, and to me it looks like it's gray. And I had some girls come up to me and they're like, "What color is this animal to you?" I was like, "It is gray." And I think I color matched it perfectly. Felt like they were attacking my intelligence and my artistic abilities. And to them, the animal looked like it was brown. So it really just and that was at the same time as the whole dress debacle. And they saw the dress differently than I saw the dress. So it's crazy to think that we all see things a little bit differently, but it's important to keep in mind that how I perceive something is going to be different than you perceive something, and how this other person perceives something could be also completely different. So maybe that will help us to have a little bit more grace and understanding with each other. Just lightening up some areas that were a little too harsh for my liking. All right, it's still a little bit dry, so we can let this, or he's still a little bit wet, he needs to dry. We can either just sit here and let it dry, or if you have a hair dryer or a heat gun, you can use that to apply some heat to it at a safe distance. You don't want to burn your page. Learned that the hard way too. So you use that hair dryer or heat gun to blow dry your piece. So that is what I'm going to do, and then I will be right back. All right, now that it's dry around the beak, I'm gonna go in and get the beak orange. Or if you are using a light pink, you can use a light pink or whichever color your heart desires. Because you know what? We can't make everyone happy. You might as well make yourself happy. because you are the one looking at your piece. You're the one that has to enjoy it. Unless, of course, you're doing like an art commission and you gotta do whatever colors they want. Got a little bit of orange in the gray, so I'm just taking a damp brush and lifting it a little bit. Now I'm going to go in with that Payne's gray and that tea light consistency, and I'm going to just paint his little nails. So if you are not quite 40 yet, beware. When you turn 40, you're either going to start getting into baking sourdough or smoking meat or what's the other thing, like crochet or birding. My husband and I got into birding. And yeah, we're pretty scientific minded people. We're pretty smart. We like looking up animals on our Seek app. And we thought we knew a lot of animals. And then we did the Christmas bird count one year. And it is, I believe it's the largest scientific citizen project in the world. And the first one. It's been around for a long, long time. I will put that in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out. And you just go to an area that they assign to you and you count the bird species, and that helps to tell scientists and wildlife biologists all sorts of things, like how well the birds are doing in the area and how they're migrating. And it's a really cool project, and we thought we knew a lot of birds, but there are a ton of birds. So we decided that, real quick, while I'm thinking of it, I'm going to make a note. So I include that in the show notes. Christmas bird project. All right, so that's going to go on the show notes, so you can check that out. I know Christmas has just passed, and we're in February right now, but, you know, you can study up on birds in your area before it comes around to you next year. I'm going to take a mostly damp brush, dip it in the paint, and I'm going to go in and dry brush along the feet. And it doesn't have to be precise or anything. Their feet are like orange, and then they've got some gray over top. So first time we did the Christmas bird count, we were given a long list. We were like, oh, we don't really know a whole lot about birds like we thought. So we signed up for a couple like bird watching and bird walks with our local parks. And that was really cool. We heard some owls early in the morning. I had to wake up at like 5 in the morning. But I'm not an early bird. I do not get the worm. I am a night owl. But so we were out with this birding group walking around, the naturalist for the park, and so I just spread out my bristles like that so that it looks a little bit more natural. So we're walking around the park, and they're like, oh, there's a scarlet tanager in this sycamore tree over there. Don't you see it? I'm like, I don't even know what a sycamore tree is. Let alone what a scarlet tanager is. And it is a really pretty red bird. It almost looks tropical, and it migrates through the Cincinnati area. And then they were talking about maples and oaks, and we quickly realized we need to start studying our trees so that we are able to bird better. So it just opened up a whole new world. Just adding in some little lines and stuff. It's a little too dark for my liking, so I'm going to wet down my brush, dry it a little bit, and then I'm going to blend it out. And you can just leave the feet. If you don't want all the detail, you can leave the feet as is. Your bird can look however he wants. Just usually like softening things up. To my eye, it looks a little bit more natural, but if it doesn't to yours, do what you want. I might speed this part up. So if you're not being as picky as me, I get really hung up in the details. I took a class over the summer, the Springfield area, the Arts Connect, great place, lots of great art teachers, and the class that I took was specifically in just painting watercolors loose, and it is not as easy as it looks. I mean, when you're looking at a simple watercolor piece on a canvas, it looks beautiful the way that the colors all blend together and in how simple it is, but actually putting that on a page is very hard, and it takes a lot of talent. So that is something I do have to practice, is loosening up a little bit. But also, maybe it's just not my style, and that's okay too. But don't be afraid to try new things and experiment with your art, because then that's how you do figure out what your style is. Are you a loose painter, or are you a little bit more detailed? Again, the feet usually up close, they're gonna look kind of ugly. And you step back, they start looking a little bit more natural. And if you really zoom in on that reference photo, there's all sorts of little wrinkles and like, I guess they're little veins or whatever. Bird feet they're so tiny and so cute. Well, in an ugly, wrinkly kind of way, I guess. All right. I'm happy with his feet. I am gonna add a little shadow. This is the back foot. So that's the foot coming forward. That's the back foot, and the other side of it is on the other side of the body. So we need to add a little bit of shadow there to add some realistic effects. And to help that look different than what we have here, it's going to be a little bit darker towards the body and then kind of fade out, you know, like a shadow would. This paper does not like to layer very well. So it will pick up the paint when I'm trying to layer, but it is good for these types of projects too. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow here because he does have some feathers and that leg is underneath the feathers, so just a tiny little bit of shadow. I'm also going to add in a shadow underneath the wing. I'm just doing that with the Payne's Gray. That's helping to add some depth. And then also adding the shadow right here by the tail. And I'm gonna add a little bit of detail in the wing. Am I? Yeah, sure, why not? Just taking a dry brush and really quick swipes underneath that black line. Those are each individual little feathers, and we're adding that shadow under there. You don't have to be too precise with it. Other thing you could do is add in highlights with a white gouache at the top of the feather. I'm getting the tail feathers too. And these little squiggly lines. Just adding a shadow on the underside of those feathers. And it's just a little added step to add a little bit more realism to them. You can, if you want, just let that black pen do all the heavy lifting. But I feel like it helped to bring the feathers forward a little bit. Now that I have some of that paint left over on my brush, I am going to add a little bit of that detail onto the beak. So he's got a little bit of gray there and there. He's got some little spots. And if you're not too happy with how it looks, you can always go back in with your orange. Go back in with your orange gouache mix, and that gouache, I'm gonna dry the barrel of the brush a little bit. The gouache is opaque, so you can paint over things and you won't really see underneath it. Okay. And then when that dries, I am going to go back over it with the Micron pen and add that detail back into the beak. And actually, I'm going to take that Micron now and color in the black part of the eye. You could just go in with black watercolor, but I usually like to do the black pen. And I'm gonna go over that black mark that we did before, really help it stand out a little bit. And if you notice around the eye, it looks like it's got a little bit of a highlight. So I'm gonna go in with some just white on my brush and outline my eyeball. And if you go over that black pen like I just did, it's fine, just let it be. And then when it dries, you can go over it with the pen again. I'm gonna lift up some of this around here. Help blend it out. It looks like it's dry already, so I'm going back in with that black pen around the outside edge. Okay, now I'm gonna add some gray inside the eye. And I want it that tea-like consistency. I'm gonna geek out for a second. I don't know if you can see it like I can see it. Maybe this is a blue dress situation, but this is why I like Payne's gray. You see where that blue is right there and right there, that it's not just gray. It's got some blue in it, some depth that helps to add to it. No, I always do that. I never let the pen dry all the way when I'm with you guys. So if you don't let that pen dry, it is gonna bleed. So make sure you let the pen dry. So I'm gonna hit it with the hairdryer and I'll be right back. And I'm back. And the beak is dry too, so I'm gonna add that line back in right here. It wasn't until I was looking up some facts about the Dark-Eyed Junco, and they said it's a sparrow. I'm looking at the beak, and that beak really, to me, just screams sparrow. So it totally makes sense now. All right. Now I'm going in with that gray. I'm dropping it right in there. And for my eyes, I always like to go in with a darker, very, very thick consistency paint around the outside edge. And then it'll bloom in and it adds some depth and makes the eye look a little bit more realistic. I don't want it to be too dark because I don't want it to get lost with the other colors in here. I don't want it to get lost in the already very gray bird. All right, so now I'm going to hit this with a hairdryer, make it dry, and then we will add some detail as far as highlight and shadow to the eyeball, and then we'll be done. So I'm gonna add the highlight first. I'm gonna pick up some gouache. And in the reference image, he has a lot of reflection in his eye. It's got like a rectangle image going here. And also down here. Now it looks really thick and scary right now, but I'm going to lift it a little bit. Because with the highlight, you can see through the eye, or see through that highlight and see the eye underneath. And I'm lifting it a little bit, it creates that highlight effect. Then I like to add one little darker dot of white. Do it towards the front since there's a lot of white towards the front. We're also going to add a shadow right underneath the lid. It looks dry. It's a nice thin, I'm going to dry the barrel of my brush, nice thin line of gray right underneath where the eyeball would start, underneath the eyelid. Right over top, a little bit of that highlight we just did. Really helps to add some dimension. Congratulations on finishing your painting. Always make sure that you initial your piece. Once you've initialed it, it is complete. If you've learned anything about painting or about the Dark-Eyed Junco, let it inspire you to do something for nature today. And until next time, get outside, see what develops, and stay wild.